Hello footy fans, welcome to another episode of the Ultimate AFL Show for season 2016. Now in this episode I'll be looking back at round 19 as well as looking towards round 20. There's only 4 rounds to go of the AFL season. The finals are just around the corner. There's some crucial games coming up. The top 8 is just so close. So let's get straight in to this episode. Round 19 started on Friday night at Simmons Stadium between the Cats and the Dogs. Of course, we know the Dogs had a very emotional week leading into this game. In fact, they had season-ending injuries to Wallace and Redpath in the game against St Kilda in round 18, which really did put a lot of emotion on the club. And then finding out they had injuries to Boyd, Suckling and Morris, who are all going to miss the game against the Cats, really made that emotion a bit stronger than it was. But the club had to regroup, get ready for this game against the Cats. They got smashed by the Cats a couple of months ago at Etihad Stadium by 57 points, so they really couldn't afford for that to happen again, because that was probably their poorest game of the year. So they started off brightly, the Dogs. In fact, Dixon kicked the first goal, and there was a late kind of part in the quarter where they kind of dropped off and let the Cats back into the quarter. But they did well in this quarter. They stuck in there and they only trailed by a point, with Geelong leading 5-2 to 5-1. At half-time, Geelong led by a goal. They started off well in the second quarter, the Dogs, but then kind of dropped off in the back end of the quarter, which kind of costed them a little bit. But at the same time, they were applying pressure. They were really in this game and really taking it up to the Cats. And I think the Cats at half-time got a feel for what the Dogs were going to do, and they kind of thought, right, okay, the Dogs are really taking it up to us. They're really here to play. Even though they have costly injuries that are really costing them, they still are here to play and still have a strong side. So they're only led by a goal, Geelong. The Dogs, to their credit, were in it at half-time. Their third quarter, they kind of dropped off a little bit, the Dogs. In fact, they didn't kick a goal in the third quarter. Geelong piled on 3 goals and about 2 behinds, and led pretty convincingly at three-quarter time, 13-5 to 8-8. It was looking likely that the Dogs weren't going to get back into this match, and in the end Geelong were just a bit too strong. But credit to the Dogs, because they did come out and give it a fair crack, and even though they had a very emotional week, they still really did take it up to the Cats and apply pressure. So the final score, Geelong 16-7, 103, defeated the Dogs 11-12-78. The goal kickers for Geelong, Stanley, he kicked 5. He was a real dominant player. Probably, was probably someone the Dogs really didn't tackle on the day. He was just fantastic. Dangerfield kicked 3 as well as Motlop. You then had Hawkins 2, Menzel, Duncan and Bartell got singles each. For the Dogs, you had Dixon kicking 3 as well as Tom Boyd, who I thought had a very good game. Dunkley, Stringer, Smith, Jong and Cordy got singles in this game for the Dogs. Played in front of over 24,000 people at the Cattery. Saturday, it started in Canberra between the Giants and the Tigers. Now, the Tigers were going into this game never having lost to the Giants in their whole club history. In fact, since 2012, Richmond have won every single game against the Giants. So that was kind of what was giving them a little bit of a sniff in this game. However, that sniff was just broken in the first quarter, because the Giants came out. They kicked 8-3 in the first quarter to Richmond, 1 behind. Yes, 1 behind. Absolutely stunning. How can that possibly be, that a club can get absolutely belted, an AFL club get absolutely belted by that much in the first quarter? It is incredible. So, quarter time, Giants led, as I mentioned, 8-3 to Richmond, 1 behind. Absolutely poor stuff by the Tigers. And then the Giants just kept on going in the second quarter, 11-5 to Richmond, 1-2. I think that was the lowest score or something, the lowest score that Richmond has had for quite some time, and it just gets worse from here, because the Giants again kicked on in the third quarter, 13-7. Richmond were able to pile on 2 goals in the third quarter, but the damage was already done, and in the end, the Giants won very convincingly, 17-9, 111 to 3-5, 23. That is the lowest score in an AFL game by an AFL club since, I think, 2014 off memory. So absolutely poor by Richmond. I said last week that their score was quite poor against the Hawks. They only kicked about 5 goals. Well, this was just even worse. They kicked 3 goals in a game of football. Not good enough. And I tell you what, that club really needs to get reviewed because the last 3 years they've made an elimination final. They've got beaten all those elimination finals, and now they've gone backwards and they're not even going to make the finals. It is incredible. So it just seems like the club really hasn't gone anywhere. I guess the elimination final has really taken them somewhere, but this year they've really gone backwards. So the goal kickers, Johnson kicked 3, as well as Reid, Green for GWS. Scully Cameron kicked 2, also for GWS, and then you had Ward, Shield, Kennedy, Smith with singles rounding out the GWS goal kickers. And then the 3 goals kicked by only 2 players for Richmond. Rewald kicked 2 and Lloyd kicked a single. Good to see a few people turning out to Manuka Oval, even though it was a one-sided game. And GWS, they're very, very dominant at their home grounds of Spotless Stadium and in particular Manuka Oval. Richmond, a lot of reviewing to go under the water after this game. They can't afford to do it in round 20. The 2:10 Saturday game was at Aurora Stadium in Launceston, Tasmania, between Hawthorn and Carlton. Of course, Hawthorn very dominant at Aurora Stadium, especially in the last few years. Haven't lost since 2012 at the venue. That was against the Swans. So it was very unlikely that the Blues were going to defeat the Hawks in this game, considering where it was. But I'll tell you what, a few people actually turned out to this game. I didn't go to this game, but a few people really did turn out. Just over 18,000 attended this event, and Carlton's first game for premiership points in Tasmania. So there was there's a bit of historic about it, and a bit of feeling about it as well. So anyway, in the first quarter, it was a bit low scoring in the first quarter. Only 2-5 Hawthorn leading to Carlton 4 behinds. A bit low scoring, and in fact, in the second quarter, only 1 goal was kicked. 1-8 Carlton to 2-8 Hawthorn. So Hawthorn was kept goalless in the first quarter, and Carlton basically won that quarter. And, they were in this game because they were only down by a goal at half-time. The third term, there was a few more goals. They were only down by 2 goals at three-quarter time, Carlton. We saw this against the Swans at the SCG the week before. They were really sticking in there and really giving themselves a chance in various stages of the game, and they were really giving themselves a chance in this game. But Hawthorn, we know they've won the last 3 premierships. They're going for a 4th this year. And to their credit, they were able to finish off the game and win. Not convincingly, because I thought they could have kicked a bigger score than that. But they won 10-14, 74 to Carlton, 7-13, 55. Credit to Carlton. They've really been taking it up to the good teams in the last couple of weeks. And that's what you want from a side, in particular, where they're at the moment. Of course, they are still developing, and the signs are there that they could make the finals in the next couple of years. So the goal kickers for Hawthorn, Bruce Segler kicked 2, Jeray, Lewis, Burgo and Gunston Hodge, and also McAvoy kicked singles each for the Hawks. Carlton goal kickers, Buckley, Gibbs, Cruiser, Cripps, Everett, Sumner and Savani, who's been having a good couple of weeks since his debut against Collingwood, kicked singles in this match. Like I mentioned, played in front of just over 18,000 people. It was a good turnout to Aurora Stadium. The Tasmanians love their football, and it's shown just there. The twilight game on Saturday was between the Pies and the Eagles, and the Eagles actually led by a couple of goals at quarter time, 4-2 to 2-5, but Collingwood, they kept them scoreless in the second quarter, and they actually led at half-time, Collingwood, to their credit, 7-5 to 4-2. They led comfortably. Wouldn't say it was a big lead, but they did lead comfortably because, they still had the lead at three-quarter time, 8-11 to 9-3, with West Coast just being in the match at three-quarter time. But Collingwood, they won pretty convincingly in my eyes. The West Coast very poor in patches of this game. They've been poor the last couple of weeks, to be honest. They haven't been winning convincingly, and that's what they need to do. If you want to be a top 8 side or a top 4 side rather, then you really need to be winning convincing games against the bottom the bottom half of the ladder, teams in the bottom half of the ladder. So the final score, Collingwood 13-13, 91, defeated the Eagles 11-6, 72. The goal kickers for Collingwood, you had Moore kicking 3. He actually won the Rising Star this week. Congratulations to him. You might remember I actually tipped him to win the Rising Star award for the year in my predictions earlier in the year. That might be the case. He is having a good year, so you never know. Aish kicked 2 as well as side bottom. You then had Cloak, White, Greenwood, Cripps, Treloar and Main Yard kicking singles each for the Pies. The goal kickers for the Eagles, Darling kicked 4, Kennedy Cripps kicked 2 as well as Hill, and you then had Maston rounding out the Eagle goal kickers with a single. So yeah, the Eagles, they really need to get back on track. They've got a derby match against Fremantle this week. That will be a big game. You'd think they should win that game, but the way they've been going the last couple of weeks hasn't really got me so convinced. But they really need to make this last 4 weeks better than what they've been showing on the field. And this was a crucial game for them because they need to be winning at the MCG. And even though they won at the MCG against Carlton, that wasn't in convincing fashion, and they haven't won at this game at the MCG. So they really need to turn things around before the finals. At the Gabba, the Lions were back at home taking on Port Adelaide, and we know they actually got smashed by Port Adelaide earlier in the year at Adelaide Oval. So this was their second time meeting each other this year. And, besides being in it at quarter time, the Lions were just not in it for the rest of the game. They got smashed and beaten. The final score, 11-13, 79, defeated by the Power, 25-23, 173. Now, I'm embarrassed because I tipped the Lions this week to get a win, and I was one of those people who got sucked into how well they played against Essendon on Sunday. I got sucked in, and I shouldn't have tipped the Lions. I should have tipped Port Adelaide because they're just no good. The Lions, they just get smashed at home. It's amazing, and it's not good enough in my eyes. The goal kickers for the Lions, Walker, Zorko, and Close kicked 2 each. He then had Hipwood, Green, Dawson, Robertson and Rockcliffe kicking singles each. And then the Port Adelaide goal kickers, Wingard kicked 5, Butcher kicked 4, Boak kicked 3, Westhoff, Impey, Eamon, Archie, Trengrove, Ebert all with 2 each. And then Young, the only single goal kicker for the Power, he kicked a single. So, like I said, it's poor how they've been getting smashed at home. And Lepich will probably coach next year, but they really need to just reassess their list a little bit and just try and get a stronger side and be more competitive, even if it's just at home. They need to be more competitive at home. If they are going on the road and getting smashed, but they're competitive at home, then I can probably take that. But they really need to be taking it up to the size of their home ground, because your home ground is basically your fortress, and they're not even showing that at the moment. On Saturday night, it was Brett Harvey's record-breaking game. It was North Melbourne to St Kilda, Etihad Stadium Saturday night, and St Kilda only trailed by a goal at quarter time. North Melbourne were able to still have the lead at half time. They led by 2 goals, and then the second half was where they took the game away from the Saints. The Saints, in my opinion, were quite poor on Saturday night, considering they beat the Dogs and were quite outstanding against the Dogs, played very well in that game, but I thought they were a bit poor in this game, especially in the second half where they dropped off. North Melbourne, for Brent Harvey, won the game 12-13, 85, defeating St Kilda 8-14, 62. The goal kickers for the Kangaroos, Brown kicked 3, Waite, Petrie kicked 2 each. Waite injured himself, has gone in to have surgery. They hope to get him back by the finals, but that might be unlikely. Thomas, Harvey, McMillan, Dermont and Mullet kicking singles each for the Kangas. The goal kickers for the Saints, Rewalt, he kicked 2 goals. Bruce kicked 2, Montagna, Aikes, Weller and Dunstan kicked singles each for the Saints. Well, this was a thriller, this game. I didn't watch this game live, but this was a thriller on Sunday afternoon, 1:10 p.m. at the MCG, Melbourne and the Gold Coast Suns. Like I mentioned, I didn't watch this game live, but I did watch this game back. And the Gold Coast were pretty good. They took it up to Melbourne. They led at quarter time. Melbourne were able to take a 2-goal lead into half time. They led it to 3-quarter time, but I tell you what, the Gold Coast Well, they could have won the game because Lynch had a shot on after, well actually, Watt kicked the winning goal, Jack Watts kicked the winning goal, and then Lynch was able to, with a turnover, forced turnover, Lynch was able to go back and have a shot on goal after the siren. Unfortunately, he was on an angle. It was a bit far out. He sort of made the distance. Well, not really. He kind of brushed it to the left a little bit, and unfortunately, the Gold Coast lost the game by 2 points in what was a thrilling game. 9-12-66 Melbourne to the Suns. 9-10-64. The Gold Coast, I believe, return there in a couple of weeks' time to face Essendon, so they'll be back at the MCG hoping to win that game. The goal kickers for Melbourne, Vandenberg kicked 3 as well as Watts, Dawes, Kent and Petrarca kicked singles each for the Ds. The Suns goal kickers Lynch, Garlett, Matera kicked 2 each, while Malcheski, Shaw and Grant all got on the score sheet with singles. Fremantle and the Sydney Swans was the mid-Sunday afternoon game. This was pretty one-sided, this game. In fact, Fremantle got thumped. They got thumped by 90 points, and the final score was 7-5-47, defeated by the Sydney Swans 21-11, 137. The goal kickers Pavlich kicked 2 for Fremantle. Taberner, Mundy, Kreuzer, Yaron and Weller kicked singles each. Of course, Pavlich playing his 350th game for the Dockers in this game. The Swans goal kickers Heaney kicked 4, Mitchell, Kennedy kicked 3 each, Towers, Rowan, Richards, Franklin kicked 2 each, and then Hannelbury, Parker and Naismith kicked singles each in this game, which was a pretty poor game by Fremantle, like this year has pretty much been. And the Swans, well, they win another, and yeah, they back at home on Saturday against the Power. And the final game was Adelaide and Essendon. Pretty easy to work out who won this, because Adelaide won pretty convincingly, 21-11, 143, defeated the Bombers 9-7-61. The goal kickers, Betts kicked 5, he was outstanding. Cameron and McGovern kicked 4 each. Seedsman, Jenkins, Douglas kicked 2 each, and then Lyons, Sloan and Hardigan kicked singles each for the Crows. The goal kickers for the Bombers, Danaher was a very shining light like he has been this year, 4 each for him. Laverde kicked 2, Fantasia, Cooney and Langford kicked singles each for the Bombers in this game, which was played in front of just over 44,000 at Adelaide Oval. Okay, time now to get into the stats wrap-up after round 19. Kennedy still leads the leading goal kickers on 60. Just 1 goal behind him is Franklin on 59. Lynch is there on 3rd in 57. Unlucky for him that he missed that goal, but wouldn't be too sad about it because it was a bit too far out. Eddie Betts 4th on 50, and then his teammate Jenkins just 1 goal behind him on 49. The leading disposals, Lockie Neal still leads the disposals on 601. Dangerfield sort of catching him a little bit, but he's a bit behind on 569. Could easily make that up though if he gets a smash number of disposals next round in round 20. Dan Handlebury is 3rd on 551. Marston on 550 and 4th, and then Collingwood's Adam Treloar is 5th on 540. You then have the leading marks. Rewalt leads the marks like he did last week on 169. Shaw on 145. He's the next best. Sam Doherty is the next best on 144 in 3rd. Lynch is there on 130 in 4th, and then Ben Reid on 130 in 5th. And then finally Matt Prentice leads the tackles on 148. Sloan behind him on 132. Curnow on 127 in 3rd. Swallow on 125 in 4th. And then Collingwood's Levi Greenwood is rounding out the top 5 of the leading tackles with 123. And then finally the ladder, and Hawthorn, they still sit top of the table after that win against Carlton on Saturday. The GWS Giants got a smashing win against Richmond. They're second, level on points with their rivals Swans and also Geelong and the Crows. West Coast is just sitting in 6, just outside that top 5, but is 4 points behind, making it the top 4. With 48, and West Coast is actually level with the Dogs and North Melbourne. A crucial game coming up against the Dogs and North Melbourne, which I'll talk about in just a few moments. Port Adelaide, you'd think that they probably won't be able to make the top 8 now, considering the run home for both the Dogs, North Melbourne and so forth, even though North Melbourne's run is pretty difficult, and they can still mathematically make it, but I'm just going to say that Port Adelaide probably won't make it in my eyes. And yeah, you have St Kilda 10th, Melbourne 11th, Collingwood 12th, Richmond 13th, the Suns 14th, Carlton 15th, Fremantle 16th, Brisbane Lions, Essendon in that bottom 2 there. Okay, time now to get into round 20, and it starts on Friday night at the MCG. Tigers and the Pies, of course, that history-making 1-point win in round 2, where Collingwood won that against the Tigers, really would play in the Tigers' mind. So this will be an interesting game starting at 7:50 p.m. this Friday the 5th of August. I'm going to tip Collingwood to be far too strong for the struggling Tigers. Saturday there are 5 games on display. It starts at 1:45 at the SCG between the Swans and the Power. An interesting game, this one. Of course, the Power got a very big win against the Lions on Saturday night in round 19, but the Swans have been tracking along very nicely. They've only lost 2 at the SCG. I'd expect them to win this one and give Port Adelaide pretty much no hope of making that top 8. So that game again starting at 1:45. The other Saturday afternoon games at the MCG, Melbourne and Hawthorn. They have already met this year. In fact, Melbourne really took it up to the Hawks, but in the end the Hawks were just far too strong. This game starting at 2:10 p.m, as I mentioned, at the MCG. I'd be expecting the Hawks to win that game. I think Melbourne will take it up to them early, but I think the Hawks will just be far too strong, like they have been for some sides this year. The twilight game at Metricon Stadium is between the 2 expansion teams, the Gold Coast Suns and the GWS Giants. Of course, we know the GWS Giants have pretty much overlapped them and coming from behind and basically being the top expansion side of both these sides. I'd be expecting them to win this game at Metricon Stadium. This game starting at 4:35 p.m. And then the 2 Saturday night games. The first one is a massive game between the Dogs and North Melbourne. 7th v 8th. I tell you what, the loser, if Western Bulldogs lose this, they will probably most likely go to 8th spot. North Melbourne will move up. So it's a crucial game for both sides. This game starting at 7:25 at Etihad Stadium. I think the Dogs will win that game against North Melbourne. They will get back on the winners list after losing their last 2. And then the final game of Saturday is at Adelaide Oval between the Adelaide Crows and the Brisbane Lions. This could be another chance for Adelaide to really expand their percentage, because I'm pretty certain that the Brisbane Lions will probably lose this one. First game of Sunday is Carlton and St Kilda at the MCG. Interesting fact, this one. The Blues have not defeated the Saints at the MCG since 1998. So on that note, I'm going to go the Saints. I'll tell you what, the Saints were really, really impressive against Carlton the last time they met earlier in the year at Etihad Stadium. So I think they'll win this game. I think it'll be a close battle, but I think the Saints have this one. The next game, the mid-Sunday afternoon game at 3:20 p.m. at Etihad Stadium. This Sunday is Geelong and Essendon. Going to be an interesting game, this one. In fact, it probably won't be as interesting as what I just made it out to be. I think Geelong will win this pretty convincingly. It would be hard to think that Essendon could defeat Geelong. And I know it was kind of close the last time they met earlier in the year. I know Essendon kind of took it up to the Cats, but I don't think it will happen this time round. So Geelong, my tip, I think we can say 100% they will defeat Essendon pretty convincingly. And then the final game, it is the WA Derby. It is a big derby, this one. Of course, the Dockers and West Coast meeting. They've already met once this year. Eagles won pretty convincingly. I think they'll win this one pretty convincingly. I don't see the Dockers beating the Eagles. Even though the Eagles have been poor in the last 3 weeks, I think the Eagles will be far too strong for the Dockers. This game, 4:40 p.m, Domain Stadium in Perth. Should get a good crowd there, as they normally do for a derby. And looking forward to this game. And that is it for this episode of the Ultimate AFL Show. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy your weekend of footy. And until next week, I'm Jacob. See you later.